Thank you, folks. We're honored to have here one of the stars of the show. You'll recognize her, Hani Furstenberg. Thank you, Hani. Right there. This is our water stool. Elijah will take a sip.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us. You recognize her as the police officer, right? There's a lot to discuss in this show. There's a lot there, but one of the things that I love about this show is that it manages to balance out the suspense and the, I'd say, social criticism at the same time. I think it takes that very seriously. And at the beginning of the show, there's the card that says that this is based on true people, true events. True events. Yeah. So what are the true events behind this?
I don't remember what year it was that it started happening, but a few years ago, Eritrean and Sudanese refugees started coming over the border. They were fleeing genocide, and they were walking literally for months across the desert. They would go. One of the actors here told me his personal story where he went. It took him 4 months to go over if they weren't caught by people in Egypt. Then they made it over to Israel. He watched friends and family members die along the way. They would be given it's crazy. Like, he told me the story while we were shooting a scene which you haven't seen yet, but it was the same day that they shot the opening scene of the series, and he said it was like this, that you would just look out at the desert and everything looks the same. I don't know how people made it, how they knew where to go, and they would walk with no shade above them, complete in the heat of the desert. He said that they would have water bottles, like 2-liter water bottles, that they would put a bit of oil inside of it so that their body wouldn't want to drink too much of it, so that they would drink a little at a time to keep themselves dehydrated. And they would know, like, they would meet somebody in the desert and they would tell them, okay, you're going to walk this way for 10 hours and it'll be nighttime. When you get there, there'll be a man waiting with a flashlight. He'll flash to you and then he'll let you know where to go from there. And you pay him and then he'll tell you where to go from there. And that's how the lucky ones made it to Israel. And since then, there have been many problems. On many levels of this happening. Should I just keep talking?
Yeah, no. I mean, the follow-up is what's their realities now in Israel?
I mean, their reality is basically, it's similar to what it was, unfortunately. They entered Israel because there was a way for them to enter the country. Once you enter a country, if the country didn't make sure that you weren't allowed to enter, once you entered, you're in their country. You cannot send them back to genocide. The government didn't know what to do with the situation, and they decided that their pitaron, their solution, thank you. Their solution was to take them in busloads and drop them off in the poorest neighborhoods in southern Tel Aviv, where there were anyway problems of poverty and drugs and prostitution. And this was kind of the society that wouldn't have a voice to speak up and do something about it. And we'll just drop them there. We won't give them work permits, which means they will have to find ways to get money and food and shelter. And we will make people very scared and turn them against them, kind of, which is a lose-lose situation, in my mind, at least.
And of course, they all live outside the law there and are fearing deportation.
They have no status. Many of them don't have a status because, as you saw in the first thing, like, how are you supposed to prove that you're not from somewhere when you don't have a passport? Where you fled genocide and you made it somehow after 4 months of walking in the desert to Israel. So yeah.
So this show was a huge hit.
Right, but now they can't get in, so it's a bit of a different situation.
Right,
but they're still being deported.
And the 30,000, they say 30 between 30 and 50,000 in Israel right now, have children growing up there, speaking the language.
Only speak Hebrew. I mean, yeah.
And some don't even know anywhere else. And of course, I mean, you mentioned those that don't make it, and we've shown films here about those who get taken by Bedouin in the Sinai and are abused.
Their body parts are sold, and they are sold as slaves, and yeah.
So one of the things this show does is actually through being a great thriller and being a police show that has, I mean, you're at the edge of your seat. Brings these stories to the Israeli reality that I think a lot of Israelis would prefer to ignore this reality existing there.
Definitely. And I think that, I mean, Eitan, the director and one of the writers and the creators of the show, who's a dear friend of mine. I started my career with him 20 years ago on a show called The Bourganim, which is like Le Bourgeois, about the bourgeois class. He is the type of person, I mean, he's like, I've seen him sit with me at a bar with tears in his eyes saying, we have to do something and we have to say something and we have to make people listen. And yeah, and I think that here they also managed to do something that kind of everyone was able to watch, which is very hard to do in Israel because people have an opinion about everything. And so they don't want you putting your opinion on them, especially if theirs is different. Yeah.
And the show got not only was watched and had great following, it also got great reviews from the press, which is also not something that you often see. That the show is both popular and well reviewed, and I think it's that social criticism that exists there. And I know Eitan's been here at the festival before and is definitely somebody who's very politically aware. The racism that they show.
This is also, I mean, this thing is this whole problem that we're in is not really a political, it's not as political as it is humanitarian in my mind. It goes back to what we were talking about outside with the Palestinian issue versus this issue, where the Palestinian issue, there's so much history of the land and of our people and the Bible and the this and the that, and and so you can somewhat, even though I stand myself on the very far left, feels like there is no left anymore. So I'm on the left.
What's left?
What's left of the left. But there you can kind of understand or empathize with people's feelings of being cheated or this is ours or what they deserve. Whereas here, there is no history. And these are people fleeing genocide. And so it's much more of a humanitarian look on it than a political look on it, I think.
I'm going to ask one more question, then we'll take some questions from the audience. But this is a completely political question. As far as, and you live both in American and Israeli society, so I consider you an expert, and you are now.
Don't consider me an expert.
But I feel that we've seen that the American Jewish community, as far as refugees go, this is a topic that's very important to us and something that we stand up for. In Israel, there's constant attempts, and the governments, and I'd say we see in the show, we see that there's a lot of animosity towards these refugees. How do you explain that difference between? So
yeah, there's a very big difference, I think. I mean, I've lived in New York for most of my life. I lived in Israel for 12 years of my life, on and off, from the age of 16 onward. And there's a very big difference between Israeli Jews and American Jews, as I'm sure there is a difference between Mexican Jews and Italian Jews. I don't know. I know of the Americans and the Israelis. And I always think, how is it that we're so different? And this is one of the things that I tend to point out, which is a very simple thought, that in America, we are 1% of the population. So we are still a minority. We still are, because of that, I think, attached to the refugee mentality and understand the need that people have to have have open arms to receive them. Whereas in Israel, we are the majority, and I think that we kind of lost our way in many ways because of that. Learning the wrong lessons from that and maybe disconnecting ourselves from being the victim, which also I think that our prime minister tends to do also with I can go on and on, but yeah. Anyway.
We do have 2 questions here. As you run up, I will say the first. I don't know if this is going to be the first question, but where can you see more episodes is the question that I always get, and this is something we're hoping this is will be the next Fauda that we'll see on Netflix. If not, we're hoping we could get it on our streaming site of Israel Film Center.
I mean, I believe that it will get there. We are now, I know, in Australia, and I think maybe Brazil, but I'm not sure. Either that's in the works, and I'm not supposed to say anything.
Say Brazil. Say Brazil.
Brazil. But I'm very much hoping that it will get here. I believe that it will. I'm so sad, just personally, that you only got to see the 2 episodes because I really am much more present in the other episodes. So you may find this a little more interesting if you had seen the other episodes. But yeah.
And I will note that Shtisel and Fauda was shown here much before Netflix ever had their hands on them. So there's hope. Yes, this is the good luck. Yeah, let's take this question.
So can you hear me? Yes. I speak a little Hebrew, but not a lot. And I speak a little Hebrew, but not a lot. So throughout the episodes, I was noticing that the Israelis were referring to the refugees as Kushim. And I really wanted to know what the implications are in terms of Israeli racism.
It's so
refugees.
Funny. That is such a smart question, and it's so funny that all questions are smart. But it's so interesting that you said that because I was rewatching the series in the past few days with my husband since it's been a while since I did it, and I didn't remember what happens. And my husband brought, because I don't even read the subtitles. I don't have that mentality. Israelis have a very much, they just are used to reading subtitles, so they read it, even if they understand. And he said, "Oh my God, it's so funny. Every time they say kushim, it says black." And I said, "Oh wow, okay. So here's a problem with with translation. We're lost in translation because." I wouldn't expect for them to write the N-word because that is much more associated with slavery and African Americans than it is there. So it's not that. But in Israel, Kushi,
it's derogatory.
It started off as being Kushia is a place in the Bible. And so it didn't, like a lot of things in Israel that started off in a very naive and nice place and then turned into something else. So yeah, it is a word for black, Kushi, which was also for black people or Africans. But unfortunately, words are what you make of them. And because of the ongoing horrible racism that is spread out through our country in Israel, it became to have this horrible connotation. And I even I don't live there now. For the past 8 years I haven't lived there. And so I was walking with my my cousin's daughters, who are twin girls that were then probably 8 years old, and I said something like she was this really sweet, in my mind, saying sweet African lady, telling them a story. And they both looked at me like, "What did you just say?" And I said, "What?" And she said, "Honey, you say shchora, lo kushim." And I was like, "Oh my God, thank you for telling me. I did not mean to say anything, but yeah. So every time you do hear them say kushi, it is a derogatory word. I would never say that now. Today I say shachor or shchora, black woman or black man. Yeah.
This was your ulpan lesson for the night. Do not use the kushi word.
Do not use the word kushi.
And use black, right up there.
This may sound naive, but where is the UN as far as any of this is going on?
I mean, it's not naive. I don't know how to answer that question. I don't know exactly how the UN works today with everything that's going on in the world. So I don't know.
But this is something, first of all, universal that a lot of countries are talking about, the African refugees and their status.
Not only the Syrian refugees, the whole
and other
world is coming
refugees.
apart. Yeah.
And I think the UN has limited control in Israel, and I've actually we screen here films every year about this, and we have never seen any kind of involvement of the UN in this topic. Can we take? Can I ask? I have another question. Which is there going to be a season 2?
We are waiting on that. I hope in the next few days we will. I hope we'll just get the green light. I know that Eitan finally gave in the treatment for the second season, which I read, and we all want there to be a second season. It sounds really good. I'm really proud of this piece. I work a lot in Israel, and it's not every day that you get to do something like this that really has something to say, and in such a smart way, and it's written so brilliantly. I mean, there are like 80 different characters in this piece, in these 12 episodes. It's all intertwined, and it manages to like whap you above the head from every which way. And so I'm really excited about the second season. I just hope it happens because, unfortunately, in Israel, it takes a lot of time from season to season because of money and lack thereof. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here, and we're very proud to present the show.